Padma, welcome to Longer Tables.
Hi, thank you for having me at your table. At your longer
So,
table.
yeah, the table is so long. People like you and I, we have so many friends that sometimes I have a feeling we don't have enough time anymore in the day. Used to try to find time to sit in these longer tables and always enjoy amazing meals with good friends, amazing food, and have an amazing conversation. That's what I think I'm doing this because I know the world wants Padma, but right now I feel like I have Padma all for me for the next 30, 40 minutes.
You do indeed.
So it's a blessing. So, of the many questions I have that I know every time I'm with you, I could be asking you, but sometimes it's not the moment. And here I'm not going to have enough time to ask you about this fascinating life of yours. But one of the things I've always been fascinated, I think you are one of the smartest, biggest brains I know. You have a memory of, wow, biblical proportions. And, and, and I read that you told a journalist that you can remember everything you ate almost every day of your life. It's like, wow. How do you have such a good food memory?
I think it's because I process the world through food. I was always like this, even when I was a toddler. I used to climb my grandmother's pantry in the kitchen and look for the spiciest pickles, and they would keep moving these pickle jars up and up and up because they were worried that my little stomach at, 2 and 3 and 4 was going to be affected badly by all the spicy food. I mean, they didn't know what to do, and at a certain point, they just left me alone because it wasn't hurting me. Then a few years ago only, when I was filming Top Chef in Seattle, I went to the Science Center and I met this Italian researcher who did a test on me, and she said, "Oh, you are a super taster." I always thought that this was bullshit. I didn't realize that it was an actual thing. And she said, "Yes, the way we do it is by a totally blind test. You can take it now." And I took it. And I think my palate always needed stimulation. And, I'm not the only one who does that. Like if you read Proust, you bite a Madeleine and you're immediately transported back to his childhood, right? And so it's the same thing for me. I remember one time, one of the very first times I met you was on the DC edition when I was filming Top Chef. I was very, very tired because I was still nursing Krishna. It was only like literally 5 weeks after I gave birth. And I remember that Marcus Samuelson had just been on for the quickfire, that we did an Ethiopian challenge. He brought the injera bread. We all got sick, and even Krishna had diarrhea from my breast milk. And I remember you came on, and I remember we were at the Spanish ambassador's place or some ambassador's place, and then we were at the studio after. I remember they were making you do some cooking demo, and you got mad and you lost your temper. And then they sent me because they said, "You go calm him down," And I said, "Well, I think the person who pissed him off should try to calm him down, not me." But I
Yeah.
remember all of it.
Yeah, amazing memory you have. And now that you bring this memory, for the record, I am not a saint. Yes, I can lose my temper, but the reason was that was a very talented young lady doing B-roll for the extras and was a particular cameraman that was very nasty to her
Ah, okay.
and nasty. And I got upset with that cameraman because I told him this is no way to treat anybody unless a lady trying to do her job for Top Chef. Even she was not filming for the top show, she was filming for the extras you put
Mhm.
online.
Yeah.
Still, that woman was doing her job, and I felt that they treat her so badly without anybody saying anything. Like I said, if this is the way you're going to be treating somebody in front of me, I don't want to be part of this. And that's why I began walking. And actually, this happened in Chicago.
It happened in
And
Chicago even before DC. See, I have
even before this year, and I
conflated.
began walking, in the middle of the night, and I was far away, and who came behind me? My good friend Padma. And when you gave me your hack, and I'm sure I was not going to be stopping the filming of the entire show, but I stand for what I thought was right in that moment.
And I stand with you if that was the
And
case.
we were shooting gazpacho. We were shooting gazpacho. Oh my God! So you're a super taster. That means that you have superpowers. You could be one day one of the new heroines on DC Comics
Wouldn't
or
that be
Marvel.
great? I would
You
love to do
should.
that.
They should make you the super feeder, the
Yeah.
woman that will feed the world. Oh
I
yeah.
would love that. I would die to be in a comic book. I love those little comic books. You know, I remember reading ones, they were written long before I was born, but Modesty Blaze, you remember Modesty Blaze? All these
Modesty
cool
Blaze.
women who they had. I mean, that would be amazing. From your
Modesty
lips
Blaze.
to the studio executive's ears.
Okay, so we're gonna move away from this, but then okay, test time. What did you eat for dinner on June 12, 1975, as a kid growing up in New York? Haha, I caught you.
It was probably it was dal and rice. If it was for dinner and it was June 12th, I would have still been in school. And the next week, after kindergarten finished in 1975, I was in kindergarten, I would have been sent back to India for 3 months because I spent 3 months every year in Madras, now called Chennai, to give my mom, who was a single mom, a break. And also, my mom didn't want me to lose the culture or the language. So I was shipped back to my grandparents' home.
So you grew up in India until you were 4. You moved New York. I know you spent time, obviously, growing up too in California.
Yeah.
But then you will. I feel you and I, in so many ways, we have. For me, happened inside Spain. I grew up in. I grew up. I was born north of Spain, but I grew up in Barcelona. But then the summers, I will be sent away, 2 hours away only. Not like you, that you will be sent far away on planet Earth. But still, to me, those 2 hours was like a fascinating moment. For me, it was so far away from where I was living. And so imagine yourself being this youngster, living a life in New York, but then being sent in summers with your grandparents in India. This had to be powerful for a young person growing up. And for you had to be a very important moment, understanding that you were part of two realities. The India that you grew up, that you were born and grew up, and at the same time the New York in America. This is a very fascinating way to grow up.
It is. I mean, I had two completely different upbringings, both equally important influences. You know, my life in America with my mom in New York City was exciting. I had a lot of autonomy. I was a latchkey kid. And in India, we lived 8 to 10 people in a little two-bedroom apartment. My grandmother cooked for that many people on a two-burner stove. She never used the fridge. My grandmother never got a fridge until 1977. And so she didn't really know what to do with the fridge except for keep ice water in it, you know. So she was cooking constantly. And I had all of these influences. My grandparents, of course, my grandfather loved books, which is why I think I'm a writer and I love to read. And my grandmother was a great cook. And through teaching me how to cook, my grandmother also taught me, you know, about life. She was a very practical woman. She was not a cuddly grandma, you know. She didn't have the luxury of time to be one. And so she would always teach me things. Like she would say, you know, when we would make like a stew of some kind, she would say, don't put everything in at once. There's a right time for everything. Everything cooks at a different timetable. And it's your job to know how to add things in what order. And it's the same thing in your life. You want so much independence, but you're not ready for that independence. And if I give you independence too early, it's going to make you, in a way, distorted because you're not ready to handle that. And I want you to have a good experience for all the things that come your way. Just like that soup has to be ready, for the cilantro. Only put the cilantro at the end. Potatoes much earlier. Cilantro at the end. So, in teaching me all these principles of food as a young girl, I'm talking 5, 7, 8, 10, 12. She also taught me a lot about life. And in my grandmother's kitchen, there was a very big hierarchy, just like a professional kitchen. First you were only allowed to break the ends off beans or wash the vegetables. Then when you got, in sixth grade, then you could start chopping. Then when you were a teenager, you were finally allowed to turn on the stove and make tea. But you were never allowed to do anything, not even make the rice, until you were in college. And then before you got married, you were taught what you needed to know.
Amazing, amazing. And I guess that's where your love for food just slowly was building up. I always say that obviously people like you, I'm talking about longer tables, also we can say longer bridges.
Definitely.
You become a bridge. And I'm sure in more ways than one, bringing what you were learning in New York to where you grew up in India, but then bringing
It back.
India back. So people like
Definitely.
you are essential enriching cultures, not
I
only
think
in
yeah,
America but everywhere around the world.
everywhere. I mean, I think it really informs my work. I would have never been able to write the Encyclopedia of Spices and Herbs if it hadn't been not only my bifurcated childhood in both India and America, but also traveling to and from those places. I stopped in other countries along the way. I stopped in Singapore many times when I was going from the West Coast because we moved there when I was in high school. But even before that, everywhere I went, I developed a taste for, I really discovered the world through food. Even when I went to study in Spain in college, the first things I learned in Spanish were food names, cebolla, zanahoria, all these things. And that helped me communicate. I started my modeling career in Madrid. That as a young person allowed me to travel the world in a way that I never had the resources to do on my own. I was a financial aid kid, you know.
Any dishes you remember eating in the tapas bars of Madrid?
Oh my God, papas bravas, all of the seafood. I mean, all the beautiful little bocadillos. I mean, so many things. I love Spain. I mean, the first time I felt truly beautiful as a young woman was in Europe, in Spain. And I think that has a lot to do with the culture of Europe versus America. And even, even in my work today, I would never ever be able to do Taste the Nation if I hadn't been an immigrant myself, if I hadn't understood what it means to be an outsider and what it means to have your own story distorted in the media. I mean, I started doing Taste the Nation because of the 2016 election and all of the vitriol and negativity from the campaign, from Trump, from Steve Bannon, from Steve Miller. I wanted to counteract that, so I started working with the ACLU on immigrant rights. And then after 2 or 3 years, I said, I want to do something artistic and creative in my professional life. And that's how Taste the Nation was born. But I bring to Taste the Nation all the baggage of being an immigrant, of being a brown woman working in a white male world in this country still. When
So
I
before we
started on
move,
television, sorry, when I started on television, there was no other South Asian person on TV. There was me and Sanjay Gupta. That was it. There was no other person from, Southeast Asia. Now it's happily better.
yeah, you open doors to many more that follow you after. When people like you break those glass ceilings, you are not doing something amazing for yourself, but you are doing something amazing for the people coming after you.
I
And so
hope
it's,
so. I
well,
mentored 2 or 3 young women in food because nobody helped me, and I want them to have it easier than I had it. young food writers like Priya Krishna, young entrepreneurs like Brittany Flees, a lot of these young women that, I wanted to be more fair for them.
This episode of Longer Tables is sponsored by State Farm. When you get a new car or a new home, the first thing you might find yourself saying is, I cannot believe it, or this is incredible. But what you really want to say is the one thing that can get you the help you need. Like a good neighbor, State Farm is there. State Farm is there with the coverage you need for your car, your home, and even boats, motorcycles, RVs, and other things that matter to you. With a State Farm agent, you know someone is there to help you choose the coverage you need. With so many coverage options, it feels good knowing you can find what works best for you and your needs. And when you need ways to get help, State Farm gives you options there too, whether it is in person or on the phone with your local agent or on statefarm.com or on their award winning app. State Farm lets you do things your way. So when you need help protecting the things that matter most, remember to say, like a good neighbor, State Farm is there. So, all this amazing life around food from the moment you you had memory. One day, 2006, second season of Top Chef, and you do the very big splash on TV. You've done 19th or 20 seasons. But for a long time, you had what you personally describe as impostor syndrome. Tell us why.
Totally. Of course I had imposter syndrome. I didn't grow up in a family that went to fancy restaurants or knew the names of chefs. We went out to eat twice a month, once for pizza, once for Chinese or Thai. That was it. And I didn't know, I always loved to cook, but I didn't know you could have a career in food. I didn't go to culinary school. I never worked as a chef on the line anywhere. But I loved food and I collected cookbooks and I really explored food in my own way when I had the resources. So when I got to Top Chef, I had already done two other shows. I had done Padma's Passport and I had also done Planet Food, both for British television and for the Food Network. But I was surrounded by chefs like you, like Eric, like Danielle Boulud, and I felt, and also sitting next to Tom this whole time, I felt very much like maybe I shouldn't be there. Like, what did I know about food that was enough? And then, to be honest, one day Eric Ripert took me aside. And I will always love him for this because he probably doesn't even know. I mean, I think he knows because I told him, but he probably doesn't realize how big of an effect he had on me. And this was before I knew I was a super taster. He said, Padma, we don't cook for chefs, we cook for people. And your palate, he said, I have been on the show enough now. He said something to the effect of, your palate is better than most chefs that I've worked with or know. He said, so you rely on how the food tastes. You don't have to be a chef to know when the food is good or when the food is bad and what will make it better. And you tell them from your heart what you think. Don't worry about if anyone else is rolling their eyes or looking at you or whatever. It's their problem. It's not your problem. And it helped me so much, really, to have somebody who I looked up to that much who said something like that to me, And I think early on, a lot of people assumed that I got the job at that I got the job at Top Chef because we were the sister show to Project Runway, and they had a model hosting that who was Heidi Klum. And so I think people, because I came from the world of modeling, they just figured, oh, she's there too. They didn't realize I had had a couple of other shows because they weren't on very long, more than one season. And they didn't realize that I had experience hosting because I started my hosting career on Italian television, on Rai, on a live show when I was 27. And so, I think Bravo in those early days didn't do a good job of, making people understand who I was. And I also felt insecure. So I'm sure you saw that on the screen. And it really took me some time to figure out. Plus, the show is so formatted, it doesn't give you an opportunity to really show your personality. Sometimes my job means I have to sideline my own opinion or my personality to get the opinion of our guest judge who's only on for that episode, or elicit a conversation and kind of manage the traffic of the conversation at judges table. So but now people, I've been on TV for so long, and I through Taste the Nation, I think people have finally gotten to see a deeper, more full impression of who I am. And also, you do something long enough, hopefully you get better at it.
Well, when I've been in Top Chef, having you near me always gave me a lot of comfort. So thank you very much
Oh,
for
I'm
taking
so
care of
glad.
everybody that came in. Yeah, I mean, I love TV, you know it. I'm not afraid of cameras. But obviously, as you say, Top Chef can be super formatted, and you only have the moments to tell the things that you hope are going to remain when they do the editing.
Yeah.
And you want to make sure that your phrases are smart and they are to the point. And that's what I always love about you, that you always had that, or that phrase for you, or you was getting the right question so people like us, we could have the right answer.
Because
So
I
thank you.
remember what that's like. You're very welcome. I see that as a big part of my job. I remember what that feels like. And I think whether it's on Top Chef or Taste the Nation or anything else I do, my job is to bring out the best in you. It's not, maybe I'll feel, my ego will feel good if I make you feel intimidated or dumb in that moment. But that's not good. That's not good for that person. It's not good for our show. I think I always try and put myself in that person's shoes if I can. And I always love having you on the show. It's so much fun. It brings so much charisma and energy and breathes life. And you have an open invitation as far as I'm concerned on either of my shows.
You are the best. So listen, I mean, just we saw this Sports Illustrated cover with the amazing, smart Padma. But my God, I know you love eating. I know you love food.
Really?
It's a pleasure watching you in a restaurant and enjoying food. And on top of that, the TV shows that everybody's just pushing you food and course after course of every contestant, and my God, this has to be hard myself. I want to be feeling better, and I don't want to be overweight. I just lost 14 kilos. I
Congratulations. You
used to
look
be
great.
134 kilos, and now I'm close to 100 kilos. My God, I feel so good, but it's so hard. I mean, Padma, how do you do it? How do you handle it? How do you feel so good with yourself when you are surrounded by food? And I know you love food too.
I
Give me
love
the
food. And
secret.
I love food. In fact, I'm working on a cookbook now, and I'm always trying to give away food so it doesn't, to my doormen, to my friends, whoever. It's really hard, is the truth. And I'm not a young woman. I'm not in my 20s. I feel young, but, I'm 52 years old, and it's very difficult. I always gain weight, Jose. I gain like 10 or 15 pounds every time I do a season of Top Chef. And it sucks. I mean, I know it's a high class problem to have, but sometimes you feel so sick at the end of the day. So I just make a deal with myself. I say, okay, in order to do my job well, and out of respect for how much heart and soul all of these chefs are putting in their dishes, I'm just going to put that aside. I'm going to do what I have to do and taste all these dishes. And then when the season is over, what it takes me 6 weeks to gain, it normally takes me 10 weeks, 12 weeks to lose. And I do it in a very healthy way. At home here with me and Krishna, we don't eat very heavy food. I'm not somebody who grew up with rich food. I grew up a Brahmin vegetarian diet, and I'm mostly plant-based. I eat bacon. I eat a pork shoulder or brisket once in a while, but I haven't ordered a steak in 25 years. When I'm at home or I'm eating personally and I'm not working, I eat fish and chicken and lots of vegetables. My plate, any plate, is always at least 50% fruits and vegetables, and then 25% starch and 25% protein. But I don't eat a lot of wheat. I eat more rice and potatoes and things like that. And then I work out. I work out more than most normal people who have full time jobs. I work out 1 to 2 hours a day, 5 to 6 days a week. I box. I've been boxing for over 20 years on and off. I jump rope. I do the speed bag. I do calisthenics. I lift weights like old school, Nautilus weights, yeah, with a trainer. And I do rowing machine. I do, anything I can. I go, even when I can't have time. Like when Krishna was really small, I didn't want to leave her. So I would do the emergency stairs in my building. I would put my headphones and go slowly, not fast, just slowly, every other step. And I got up to doing like 70 flights of stairs in 35 minutes. And just constant things like that. Because I don't like to run. I can jump rope, but I don't like all the bouncing. My boobs can't take it, to be honest. Even with a sports bra, there's too much impact. So I used to spin. I used to do bike riding. Anything I can do. I've done Pilates. I don't like group classes because I don't like people yelling at me and woo woo. I don't like that shit. I like very, very calm, very meditative, very serious exercise, and that's how I managed to do it. I mean, I probably have been anyway blessed with a high metabolism compared to most people, which I'm thank God I have, but it is hard. It takes a toll. Both my parents are diabetic, so I have to be very careful with how I eat on my personal time. But I feel better now about my own appearance than I did in my 20s and 30s. I never appreciated anything in my 20s and 30s. Now, with great humility, I really appreciate everything because I think also when you get older and you live a little and you suffer also a little and you lose things and you gain things and then your well is deep, then you have more to count on than just how pretty you look in a shiny dress, right? You have some character, you have some life in you, and that kind of life, that kind of character, to me is much more sexy, much more interesting, much more alluring to be around. I know that's true for me and the kind of people I'm attracted to. You can see somebody and you think, oh, they're really good looking. You get to know them, they're boring as hell. They become less attractive. The opposite is true too. Maybe you meet somebody, you go, oh, I don't know, they're overweight or they're not as tall as me or whatever. But then you get to know them and they make you laugh and they're so witty and sharp and they're a good raconteur. And then you're like hanging on their every word. And before you know it, you're in bed. You don't know what happened.
Okay, you hear it here at the longer tables. Yeah, yeah, a plate of food for a fascinating tomorrow. This episode of Longer Tables is supported by the 2024 Nissan Pathfinder. From moody jungle paths and snowy trails to rolling sand dunes, the 2024 Nissan Pathfinder has the capability to take you to some of the most epic destinations on Earth. Yeah, including your local farmers market. As you know, I love to travel. That's why I'm so excited to this partnership with Nissan. There is no better vehicle for chasing bigger, better, and more exciting adventures than the 2024 Nissan Pathfinder. With 7 drive modes, the Pathfinder's available intelligent 4-wheel drive is built for even the most epic journeys. And it even has up to 6,000 pounds of towing capacity, so you can bring the fun with you. So, thanks again to Nissan for supporting longer tables and for the reminder to chase bigger, better, more exciting adventures and enjoy the ride along the way. Learn more at nissanusa.com. intelligent four-wheel drive cannot prevent collisions or provide enhanced traction in all conditions. Always monitor traffic and weather conditions. Towing capacity varies by configuration. See Nissan Towing Guide and Owner's Manual for additional information. So, with Taste of the Nation, I love, Padma, that you push to have people think about food in a serious way. As you know well, so do I.
Yes.
But
And you
sometimes I
do it
feel
brilliantly. You do it
sometimes I
so
feel
brilliantly.
no everybody appreciates that, right? Did you had any push with your show about people trying to make it being less thoughtful or less deep? I mean, I know that you speak your mind always, and that's what we love about. So it's not gonna be ever anybody's gonna. So I see the real Padma, the real heart and passion of Padma in the show. You bring issues in a fascinating way that are important. I know how much you care about migrant workers,
Mhm.
migrant rights, and but this show of yours, it's I love it because you are really touching important things without people even realizing.
Thank you, Jose, and thank you for showing Taste the Nation to your students at university. You were one of the first people to do that. And now I have so many teachers that write to me from middle school, from colleges, every level who say, I'm showing this episode or that episode because it's better than what's in the history books, especially about indigenous people and the Black community as well. I, for me, I was always a history buff when I was in school. I was a nerd. I love local history as well. And I'm very lucky, to answer your question, I'm very lucky that I have a patron and a partner in Hulu. I think if I tried to get this show made and six different networks turned me down, okay? And nobody wanted to make it.
Hold on, people of longer tables. Even the great Padma was torn down for an amazing original idea. Lesson learned here: persist, keep knocking on the door, don't give up, and eventually one day you'll achieve it. So that's
And
great that
yeah.
you kept going, Padma. So keep
I'm
going.
so glad. I'm so glad that those six people turned me down because the seventh network was Hulu. And they are the perfect partner. Sometimes they disagree with me because they want to make it family friendly and everything. And, but they listen to me. We argue some things out, and I say why I want something in it. It's not a journalistic show, it doesn't try to be. Taste the Nation is one person's opinion, mine. And I try to be as balanced as I can because I want to be credible. I want to be as fair as possible. And Taste the Nation isn't created for people who think like me or like you. It's created for people who live in red states, who vote differently than I do, who are maybe a little scared of their neighbors that they don't understand, or they don't understand the accent, or they have a hard to pronounce name or whatever. That's who Taste the Nation is designed for. And I just, you know, I'm very lucky to have been able to do Top Chef for so long, but so much of food television, even the quote unquote lifestyle shows, it's so analytical, and it's so demonstrative, and it's all about one person telling you about everybody else. And in my show, it's really about the emotional connections that food has, and how it's so much deeper than just what you put in your mouth. And Taste the Nation is about me giving my platform to people who normally don't get a platform, to people who don't have that same high caliber A-list representation of their community and their stories. And so it's really about hearing from them. It's taking back. Let them tell us who they are. Why should we, as Westerners, I include myself, we, because I've been growing up and working in America. How dare we tell them who they are? And how dare we not listen? That's how I feel. And I'm of the opinion that everybody has an interesting story to tell. You just have to be willing to listen. And you just have to be patient and let them feel comfortable. And that's my biggest job, whether I'm doing it with you or I'm doing it with a little old lady who doesn't speak anything but Khmer, in Lowell, Massachusetts. And so it's very important to me that I don't do to them what has been done to a lot of us as immigrants, and just kind of whitewashed. Or for so many years, I saw so many people like doing these kind of travel shows and going somewhere and like it's like a fish out of water and it's like ew, or isn't this cool, or isn't this crazy? It's like, no, you have to treat their food as valuable as your food is to you because it's valuable to them and it should be valuable to all of us.
So in the current season, you came to my hometown, Washington, D.C., and you talk with Afghan immigrants. How was that experience?
It was wonderful. I mean, I've been to DC so many times, and usually when I'm there, I usually just eat at your restaurant, you know, and so or Rasika or something, So finally, I love Afghan food. It's very Indian adjacent, as I like to say. It's only Pakistan separating us. And I was always fascinated with this food. And what we do in that episode is we interview 4 different generations of Afghan immigrants because they've all left a different Afghanistan, and you see how much this tiny country is so influenced by American foreign policy and American meddling, some to very good results like education for women, some to not so great results. And if you haven't been to Lapis in Washington, D.C., it's in the Adams Morgan, is that right?
Yep, I have to go. I have to go. It's on my
It
list.
is
I
so
will
good.
go because you soon.
It's delicious. And Shameen Popal is so elegant. And she taught me how to make this Kabuli pulao, which is this feast of a rice dish made with lamb and rice and vegetables. And it's fantastic. And, I come from the land of basmati rice. I am a rice snob, but that rice is so delicious. And then we talk to this beautiful young woman who, like me, used to have a show on Afghan television, and she had to escape for her life when the Taliban came back on. Her name is Tabani Braz, and she was on one of those big cargo planes that we saw people hanging off of, 2 or 3 summers ago. And so she's still shell-shocked when I talk to her. And she left a very different Afghanistan than Shameen, who left in the 80s or early 80s. So you have Russian occupation, then you have the Mujahideen, then you have the Taliban, then you have now the Taliban again, then you have Al-Qaeda. So all these things, really influence life there. And I found it fascinating. And you also learn that Afghanistan is not just one type of person. It is many different kinds of ethnicities. And so we talked to the Hazara community because they also had to flee because they were discriminated against. And so we talked to this Uber driver who happens to be one of the most eloquent men I've ever met in my life, and we learn about Hazara culture and their food. We also met this musician. We had him compose original music, Afghani music. And so every episode is a wonderland for me. I learned so much. I have like 50 books. I learned the poetry of each culture. I read short stories. Jamil Jan Kochai, who is this National Book Award nominee, which he was just a young writer. I found him from the New Yorker, and he's very lovely. He breaks down the history of Afghanistan in such a quick, approachable, easy to understand way. And after he was on our show, he was nominated for a National Book Award. He has a story in this edition, this week, of the New Yorker. And he has a couple of books of short stories, and it's a lovely, lovely young writer. And he beautifully talks about what it's like psychologically as an American teenager to grow up with all those video games like Call of Duty. And the bad guy you are always killing is the guy that looks like you and your brother and your father. and what that does to him, and this kind of weird dichotomy of self-loathing that you develop as a brown person in this country. It's beautiful. It's heartbreaking, that episode. I love it so much.
So people, you have to watch this show and then go to La Peace in Adams Morgan and do a 360 degree. So before I move on to the next question, Washington D.C., did you already got the invitation for the state dinner when the Prime Minister of India is coming to the White House?
No, I did not. I didn't get it.
I know you will. I know you will. Just
I
get ready.
am on some White House Council of Food, but I couldn't go to the ceremony because I'm
Yeah.
always working.
Yeah,
But
I
I
know
think
we
I
will
have to
see you
go
in the
for a
state dinner.
state dinner.
I'm 100% sure you'll be there. So you did DC, but also you did New York. And in New York, of all the restaurants, you went to one, Veselka, almost 68 years in business, an Ukrainian restaurant. It's almost like the food embassy of Ukraine in New York, in the States. And you concentrated in one dish that Ukrainians are very proud of. Even I know it's a lot of country can claim ownership. Ukrainians love their borscht, even in so many different borscht I
Yeah.
learned over the last year and a half all across Ukraine. What did you discover about going to that restaurant and visiting all the Ukrainian immigrants here in New York?
I've been to Veselka a few times. It's right down the street from my house, and I never understood all the history. And in the Ukraine, obviously we wanted to do a Ukrainian episode because of what's going on in that part of the world right now. But we also look at anti-Semitism in Ukrainian communities, both here in America, but also in the Ukraine. And there are two communities. The Catholic Ukrainians are mostly in the East Village, and the Jewish Ukrainians are mostly in Brighton Beach. And in Veselka, you learn the story. Borscht is such a good metaphor for what's going on between Ukraine and Russia right now. You're right, Jose. There are many types of borscht. Borscht is very popular all across Eastern Europe, but the borscht that people know all over the world, the beet borscht, that beautiful magenta-colored borscht, is Ukrainian. And the first time I had borscht was at the Russian tea room. It wasn't at Veselka. I was having pierogies at Veselka, and I was thinking they were probably, Polish when I first had them. And so, or varenikis, they call them varenikis in
The
Ukraine.
Berenikis.
And so what I learned was that this thing between Russia and the Ukraine is not new. There was a Holocaust that was created by Stalin. It's called the Holodomor, and it was a man-made Holocaust through starvation. And the Russian, Tsar, and then after in the 40s with Stalin, and now, maybe not the 40s earlier, but now this is happening, and it is a long, long saga, and the Ukrainians are just fighting for what is theirs. They just want to be left alone, and the solidarity that they have been able to harness and also localize at that one tiny restaurant is incredible, and even the church there in East Village, all of the things that they're doing, it's very, very moving. And it just goes to show you, in my backyard, there's so much history. I go to the butcher shop there, and this guy, he's so funny. He said, you have to come in the back, and I literally see how the sausage is made. In the Filipino episode, I learned for the first time how to carve a pig's head, which as a Brahmin girl was a really big deal. Because I'm not a chef, I go to the butcher, they make a nice package for me, I take it home, I wash it, I use it.
I saw it in some of the promos. You seem to be doing amazing. So you mentioned the Holodomor, that this happened 1930, 31, 32,
Yeah,
33.
exactly.
Millions die. And what's happening right now, it's almost, in a way, a starvation. Now, not for the Ukrainian people. Ukrainian people are good farmers. I think, unfortunately, they learn from what happened in the Holodomor. The issue now is that there's many people that depend on the food produced in Ukraine, people in Africa and Asia, other parts. And without that grain and those cereals, I'm very worried that we're going to have another big hunger issue in the month and couple of years ahead if this war doesn't stop. But that's what we love, Taste of the Nation, because you're showing us that every plate of food and the people that make that food possible is stories that go beyond what is obvious to the eye, obvious to the taste. And that's what you're doing with every one of those connections with the people, with the food, telling the story of who we are, one plate of food at the time. So, was the pig's head your most memorable dish of all the shows? Or tell me which one was your most memorable, like the one you say, wow, this was a special, and that you are so lucky that you had that show, because maybe without the show, that memorable moment wouldn't happen. Was there one moment that stands above all others?
Yes, I mean, I had so much good food. The kabuli palau and all the food in the Afghan episode is so delicious. But my grandmother who raised me, she died like a week or I think 10 days before I started filming, and we went to Puerto Rico was the first episode. I went to India for 72 hours. I got to see her for half an hour before she died, and then I just had to come back. And I think it was good for me to go right to work because it occupied me. And then we did 2 or 3 episodes. We did the Nigerians, the Afghans, the Puerto Ricans, and then we went to Cambodians in Lowell, Massachusetts. And I was preparing this food to take to the temple to make an offering, which was this beautiful fish and noodle soup with this mother and daughter team. And mother doesn't speak any English. She's telling me in very basic Khmer, and that her daughter is translating about losing 2 of her children when she escaped the jungle, escaped through the jungle from the Khmer Rouge, one due to lack of basically antibiotics, another one due to starvation. And she's making this food, and we're packing this food in this beautiful carved tiffin box, very easy soup to make. I learned how to make it. We take it to the temple, and I'm sitting there with all these old women. We don't understand each other. And then all the priests come and they start chanting. And it was the first time that I had heard any chanting in Sanskrit since I cremated my grandmother.
Wow.
And, my grandmother died I saw my grandmother at like 8 at night. My grandmother died at 7 in the next morning. We took her out of the hospital by 9. We did all of the funeral rites with all the priests. And by 2 p.m., she was cremated. By 3 p.m., I was waist deep in the Indian Ocean, scattering her ashes. And I was back on a plane that midnight. It was so, so, so intense. And I just pushed it down and pushed it down. And it was good because I had other people to focus on and their stories and stuff. But when I heard that, after I made that dish and I heard all these stories from this woman about losing her children and going to the temple, I couldn't take it anymore. And when I heard what I've heard all my life as something very sacred, even if it was in a Cambodian accent, it's still the same prayers. I just broke down and I started weeping. I'm pretty good about having a poker face, but I just couldn't, even though I didn't know what they were saying, I just lost it. And I will never forget the taste and the warmth of that noodle soup in my mouth ever in my life.
Wow. So with this, my dear friends, this is an invitation to everybody in Hulu, Taste of the Nation, the new season, where you will learn what's behind every dish through this amazing storyteller, my friend, Padma Lakshmi. I love you, Padma. Thank you for being
I
on our
love you
tables.
right back. Thank you for having me on. Mwah.